Okay, I think we are live. Can you guys hear us, the 51 attendees we have here? Yes, no? There is a chat window that can be activated through the chat icon at the top bar. Okay, awesome. We got three yes. Oh, well, four. Yes. Okay, amazing.
Now we're gonna get 50
Can you guys see the slideshow that says integrating user research in your design process? Okay. Whoa, amazing. We're getting a lot of no. Okay, Michelle, now. Okay, okay. Now I'm getting confused. This research process is the data is pretty mixed up on no slideshow. Okay, Olivia. Olivia, can you see the slideshow? Yes. Okay. Okay. So I think most of the people see it. Okay. Awesome. So we'll get started. So we have our three amazing panelists here today. And my camera, unfortunately, won't be able to work because of some limitation with the tool. So thank you so much for joining us today for this, for our first webinar, which is focused on user research. So the three amazing panelists we have here we have Nick Ho, who's joining us from Walmart e-commerce in the US. He's the director of UX there. We have Shira, a very own Toronto-based director of design of Universe, which is an events and ticketing platform, which we are using for our next DesignX this September. Yeah. And then lastly, but not the least, we have Ryan Short, who's joining us from Ottawa, and he's the founder and CEO of Detour UX, an agency based out of Ottawa. So before we get into the webinar, a big shout out to NomNom, nomnom.it, which is they're a community sponsor, and it's basically a tool that you can use to collect all the user research feedback in one place and also analyze it later on. They've offered us a promo code data-driven UX for 20% discount for the 1 year. And also a big thanks to TopTal for just supporting our DesignX initiatives. TopTal is a talent search platform for developers, designers, and product people. Cool. So I'll just go over the agenda for today. So we are 6 minutes behind. So we'll start with the brief intros from the three amazing panelists we have here. Then we'll start with the panel discussion on the main topic. And we'll have about half an hour we have saved for the panel discussion. And after that, we'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A and last 5 minutes for wrap up. So I would suggest save your questions towards the end of the webinar, as it is a pretty short webinar. So why don't we get started with a brief round of introductions from all three of you, and we could start with Nick, and then Shira, and then Ryan.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Ho. I'm a director of design and user experience with Walmart Labs here in San Bruno, California. Originally from Toronto, graduate of University of Waterloo Kinesiology. I've been doing UX for about just over 20 years now. I currently run part of the design team here at Walmart. That's me.
Awesome.
Awesome. So hey guys, I'm Shira. I joined Universe a year ago to help grow and scale our design team. Just a little bit of background around me. I actually have a degree in animation from Sheridan, and I've been kind of working at different agencies and startups for the last 8 years. And so in coming to Universe, we are a marketplace for finding and creating events and helping event organizers sell tickets and manage their events online. I kind of brought a more human-centered approach to our team, and so our user research process is only a year long. So I'll be excited to talk to you guys about that for our medium stage startup that we're 6 years old. We were acquired by Ticketmaster in 2016. And so it'll be cool to talk to you guys about the things that we've been doing with the resources we have, which is always a struggle for people getting into user research.
True.
Cool. Hey guys, my name is Ryan Short. I'm the founder and CEO of a UX agency called Detour. We're based out of Ottawa, but we really do work countrywide. I'm also a Sheridan graduate from the design program, so go Sheridan. And our team is 4 years young, but I've been doing UX now for probably 14 or 15 years. So excited to be here.
That's pretty amazing. Welcome, Nick, Shira, and Ryan. Okay, so getting started on the topic. So let's start with the title of the webinar itself, which is like integrating user research into the design process. So in most of the teams, the design teams especially, or product teams that you see across agencies, startups, and even some of the corporate companies, you see the two teams usually sitting in silos, right? So not silos, but being, of course, like separate teams. So they'll have a research team, which might even have like data scientists, so fully fleshed out research team, and then of course you have the design team, which involves visual designers and product designers. So how do currently these two different roles collaborate at each of your companies? And how do you see the collaboration happen at each stage? So is user research, like happens only at the beginning of the project, or does it go through at each stage as you flesh out the product? Yeah.
I'll jump in. During my time here at Walmart, I've been with Walmart just almost 10 years now. We've actually gone through both models where we've had user research to be more of a services type of model where they would support multiple product teams. And by product teams, I mean product design and engineering. So we did that model for a while, but our current model is actually we have research embedded within each of our product teams. So there's always a dedicated researcher as well as potentially other UXers on the team who have interest in research as well. So we've done both models, but currently we have research embedded within all of our teams.
Right.
Yeah, so for us, like our entire company is just 58 people, and our product team is made up of around 30 people. So basically our team is separated into smaller squads, and each squad has, design PM and multiple engineers. So I would say that the role of research really crosses between PMs and designers. And depending on, for our fan squad, obviously we have like in the millions of people buying tickets versus our event organizers, which is in the thousands. So when we talk about our event attendees, we definitely have our PMs are doing more A and B testing and more of that quantitative research, whereas we're doing a lot more qualitative activities with our event organizers, doing everything from user interviews to actually doing field studies, going in and seeing, how they're using our apps on site to scan and sell tickets at the door and things like that. So, user research is really about understanding their needs, behaviors, and motivations. And so it mixes between the ideation stage where it could be a PM that's really gathering the data from our, database, Domo and Google Analytics and providing that in a brief to designers. Or it could be designers and PMs together going out to really interview users to understand more about the problem. So it really depends on the stage. We kind of have our toolkit of user research tools that we use when appropriate.
Right.
Yeah, so I think really to go along with what everybody else has said. I mean, I'm by no means going to disagree. Both the answers were very much correct. I think the only thing I would add is that throughout the process, we not only have product owners, product managers, and designers and researchers involved in the research process, but also developers. involved throughout the research process. But by sort of having that collaborative effort, nobody's really putting on a black hat. Nobody's really saying, this isn't possible, because everybody sort of came to the same resolution or come to the same answer. In terms of at what stage, our team is a big fan of doing research through every single stage of the process. So although there's a bigger research component up front around understanding stakeholders, also validating any of those decisions, the research that we've made along the way.
Right. So that's pretty interesting. It seems like on Ryan and Shira's side, research is kind of owned, or it is part of the product team. Whereas, of course, like even with the size of the organization on the projects on Nick's side with Walmart e-commerce, you have the user research almost like as a resource that was initially leveraged from outside the team, but now you have dedicated researchers for every team, right?
Yeah, we have it dedicated, and similar to what both Ryan and Shiva were saying, like our researchers support the team throughout the process, and then helping them get answers to the questions that they have about the users throughout the process. So whether it's formative research in the beginning all the way to doing usability research in the end, it's sort of the team gets supported as they see needed, but also the researcher, because they're embedded, they can help guide the team to figure out like, oh, you probably need to do this type of research here. So
right.
By embedding it just works better for the entire product team itself.
Right. So Ryan and Shira, this question is, I think, more directed at you guys. Like, do you think, that there are any underlying biases just because the product team is also responsible for building and shipping the product, and and they are the ones that need to bring the research to kind of validate or invalidate their own assumptions on which they're building the product? So have you experienced any kind of those biases being surfaced, and also when project deadlines are shorter, which they always are, that research can be compromised a little bit if it's not an external resource?
Oh, definitely. Like all the time, story of my life. I think we always want to do more research. We'd always want to have some form of research or taking back our ideas or our prototype and testing it with real people. But you have to do what you can with the resources you have and the priorities and timelines. I really liked what Ryan was saying about, in bringing everybody into the process, not just PMs and designers, but bringing developers too. And I could, once for one of the field studies, we had a team the on-site team go out to Cast Days, a beer festival last year, and our mobile Android developer, Jason, went out on the field, and it's you get a different level of empathy when you're there. It almost motivates you. As somebody that's building a solution, when you come back, you want to solve these problems. So I think in addition to just gathering information and understanding more about who you're serving, I think it just gives you a new level of motivation too. So I think there's definitely a bias when it's just, maybe a designer and a PM going out and doing the research. But ultimately, I think we have to make trade-offs with the resources that we have.
Right.
Yeah, similarly, definitely some product folks or business folks may come in with their biases or their opinions about the project. And so that is where research does help shed some light and give them some information about more from the customer's perspective. What are the issues that they are dealing with, or to help with the team to say like, hey, we have these multiple options. A product person might say, we like option A. This is the way we think we should go. But then through research, we can help sort of take away the opinions and let sort of the data just sort of help us, give us directionally which way to go. And that's how we use research to try to overcome some of the bias that might come in from other stakeholders along the way.
Right.
I also think I think it's just like a mindset, because, you need to build advocates within your product teams of people that care about, that are advocating for the users and stepping away from their own biases of this is what I think the product should be. I think ultimately the more user research we have, the more leverage we have to back up our design decisions and know that we are actually heading in the right direction.
Right.
I think to that point though, and something was mentioned a moment ago around, the data that we can collect to make a design decision. I think data is really important, obviously, but how that end user feels is sometimes just as important and can sometimes sway the decision. So.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I meant when I say data, I mean both the quantitative and the qualitative, right? Because the quantitative will just tell you what they're doing and how users are behaving, but to really understand why, you have to go out and do that qualitative kind of research.
Right. That's very true. And that brings to an interesting point, and something I've been lately thinking a lot about is that whenever we are making certain design decisions, of course, like they're not always, but if it could be based on some research we had, or it could be just based on our experiences from having done a similar kind of project many times before. But again, these are just like some decisions that we end up taking. Is there any kind of follow-up that you guys do to kind of close that loop? And I know usually it is hard. So a project that you're working on today and this month, and you are making quite a few decisions every single day. And, not always are we documenting those decisions and what was the thought process behind those. How can we close the loop, 3 months down the line when the product actually launches, that were those assumptions correct or not? So we did the first part of the research, but we never went back, or I don't know, do you guys go back and validate those assumptions? Yeah.
Yeah, so I can say, yeah, we definitely validate the assumptions and the designs that we created in the sense that once we launch a feature or a project within Walmart, we have lots of metrics, we have lots of analytics to see sort of how things are going. So we'll have success metrics for each and every project, and so the behaviors we're expecting to see. So depending on whether or not after we launch it, if we're hitting those metrics, then we're good. But if we're not, that's when we're going to deep dive in a little bit more and perhaps do some more user research to understand, to Shira's point, the why, because we're looking at the what's happening. And same way, we also do other things like we call health checks. So we're a large e-commerce site. We have many projects going. Sometimes they're not always well coordinated. So we just want to see, sometimes on a monthly basis, we'll basically give our customers or some testers, hey, go shop on, here's $75, go shop on the site, so that we can actually see what the customer is just doing, because we release projects and features sort of, our teams are very independent, so they can release things as they see fit. But we also try to check to see, as a customer just using the site, how does everything fit together? Because sometimes there are some unintended consequences or behaviors that happen because we have such autonomy between our teams. So those are some of the ways that we try to just post-release figure out, have we done the right thing, and is the behaviors that we wanted or the metrics we wanted going the direction that we are expecting.
Right.
Yeah, for us, well, every team has basically a goal for the quarter. So if you're on the team that is focused on retention, so our retention team is focused on how do we get event organizers to come back, and if they only started creating their event, how can we get them to finish it? If they've created one event, how can we get them to create their second event? And so, getting them to come back means we have to set out a goal in the first place for when they're doing research. So for any research endeavor, for trying to learn more about a user problem, we'll have to write, what's the goal of this particular, user interviews that we're going to do, and what's our assumption? And maybe our assumption is if we modify X, Y, and Z, there will be an improvement in conversion, and we'll get more hosts coming back. And so, yeah, I always recommend definitely setting really, specific goals for every research endeavor, because then once we've actually created our solution, we can go back and test with our event organizers and say, hey, how is this new page? Is that assumption true? Right. And validate it there. And that's a kind of an example of how we try and implement user research throughout the process from beginning to end.
Right.
Yeah, I think the only thing we would do in addition to that upfront is is by defining any archetypes or defining any personas. We can, when we go through that persona definition, we can come up with assumptions or goals based on those individual types. And when we go through the design process and when we go through the testing process, both from a qualitative and quantitative perspective, just ensuring that each of those personas goals or each of those archetypes goals are met.
Right. That's yeah. Some people seem to be having some sound issues. I just see Reza and Kim. Did the refresh page work? Like they hack? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Sorry. Yeah. Seems like some people are having some trouble with the tool. Yeah. Okay. So that's really interesting to see. The three different perspectives, the three perspectives which are different at certain stages, and of course, with the nature of work that three of you are working on, and where the similarities and differences come into play. So I know you guys already touched upon some nuances of when you leverage more qualitative research versus when you leverage more quantitative. So I have kind of like two main questions around it. So first of all, and again, like it might be a little too candid to answer that. That is there one particular area that you focus more on just because of the kind of resources you have, or just maybe the nature of the business that you're in, and especially with like Ryan, it might be subjective to the clients you're working with. So is there, you guys are more focused on qualitative or quantitative for the most part? And then secondly, how do you plan to, grow, like assuming, of course, both these sides are not totally even? How do you always like balance that out? Like, do you think like, no, qualitative sometimes is more important for ABC reasons?
I'll start. So for us, no, we don't focus on qual or quant more. It's really we enable and empower the team to say, here are the questions we want to figure out. They work with their researchers on their team to figure out how to answer those questions. So it might be a qual method or it might be a quant method, but it's really about empowering the teams, getting them the answers that they need in order to move forward with the design process. So for us, yeah, we don't put a preference over one or the other. It's to just whatever the team needs, we do.
I think the only thing to that is if we are collecting data and we're still not sure. Again, I know I keep pushing this, asking the person why, but still a huge fan of. I know data can give us an answer, but I still love having an opinion or still having an emotional feel.
Right.
I think for us, same thing as Nick. We give, we have a toolbox here, and we give each team member, each team, the freedom to decide which tool they need to use and why. But I think in general, the further along in the product cycle, near the end, once you're on the testing side of things, it's more about measuring performance and optimization and kind of like what experiments or tests can we do to learn about, how we can improve this particular solution. Whereas initially it is more on the, yes, we want to look at the quantitative numbers and to find out kind of how people have been using the platform and products so far. But also really going into the user interviews to understand more about their motivations and why they might be behaving a certain way. But if it was something completely greenfield, then it would be less on the quantitative at the beginning and more on the qualitative kind of discovery.
Right. Is there one example each that you guys could share where you leveraged either the qualitative or quantitative and it made a considerable impact or some kind of like something that you guys were not anticipating?
Yeah, I could share one. So we recently released guest checkout. So, as an event attendee, you're buying tickets to an event and you can check out as a guest.
Right.
Logically, that makes sense. You think that, yeah, absolutely, that's going to increase conversion. But in terms of even releasing it, you can't just release something like that into the wild and have, lose thousands of dollars as a business. So we had to make sure that we were A and B testing it slowly. And there was kind of like a 3-phased approach to user research there and releasing it, making sure that until the numbers, until guest checkout outweighed the conversion of the other one, we weren't going to release it into the wild. So, it was great. Like in the end, it kind of went up by 4.25% in conversion. So that's great. But yeah, some other things we did were just like testing that. We have a partnership with usertesting.com. And so for our people coming to events tend to be more like general admission, like mass appeal. So we can definitely leverage, usertesting.com for any just little tests, task-based tests and things like that to understand how they use guest checkout. But we even went to Starbucks to talk to people just to observe, because, what people say is very different than what they do. So just going in and seeing how they actually use guest checkout. We tested concepts with them to see which one, would be more effective. So just a bunch of different, phases for something as big as guest checkout, where that it could affect and have such a huge impact, if not rolled out properly. There's just a lot more care that went into making sure we take all the right steps, including our users.
Right. Nick, Ryan?
Sure, yeah, an example, like how we do qualitative research. So when we were looking at how we're looking at trying to create a shopping list feature, we used by going into our customers' homes, doing some contextual inquiries about how they build their shopping list. You really sort of get to understand and learn, the emotions that kind of go into it. And because for the Walmart customer here in the U.S., like these are Walmart moms, Walmart families that they're relying on Walmart to stretch their dollars. So it's really like understanding those feelings, those behaviors, and then trying to integrate that into the design to build sort of an emotional context to our design. So that's an example of how we've tried to use qual and sort of understand emotional context to then guide the rest of the design throughout the process.
Right. That's pretty cool. Ryan, any example of leveraging qual or quant that brought any surprises or was really impactful?
Sorry, leveraging?
Either qualitative or quantitative research at maybe one of the recent projects that you worked on, and it brought up something that either you were surprised about or was just overall impactful to the product.
Yeah, so I was working on a big retail mobile project actually, and we went. I hate to sound like an ad for usertesting.com here, but we were also using usertesting.com in a very iterative approach, and we got to a certain perspective that everybody was happy, the product owners were happy, the design team was happy, and it was a miss from the actual end user's perspective. And there was a level of confusion around navigation. So we had to go back through an entire design process.
Right.
Given it was remote user testing. Again, it was a small sample size, but it was enough of a sample size to determine that we needed to make some other design choices.
Right. That's pretty interesting. Okay, so actually carrying on that, and I think this would be our second last question because we have about 7 to 8 minutes left. So, do you think sometimes user research can, in fact, I want to put it nicely, we have a lot of user researchers listening to our webinar. That user research you think could could hinder or like somehow like homogenize the experiences that we all are building. So like one thing I constantly ask myself is like, what research did the Snapchat team do to make this kind of like interactions that they have, which like I still find it hard to just navigate through the app, right? And then you of course look at like Instagram and all the other social networking apps where it's very predictable patterns, and it's obvious that when they would have done user research, you found the navigation easier, all those things. But then, of course, like Snapchat was pretty or is pretty sticky as well, right? So, like, do you think these, when we do a lot of like, especially qualitative or even quantitative research, because it's based on mostly or might be based on historical data, that it would lead to all of us creating very similar experiences?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that research, you should use it to really understand who you're building it for, but then it's up to you to be innovative and creative and try to build the best of the best way to solve that problem and ideate on it. I don't think it hinders it. I mean, again, I think you don't want to, if we listen to people and we asked them what they needed, they would have said faster horses, right? Instead of cars.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think it's a balance between, again, looking at what they're doing, hearing what they're saying for context and more of just that emotional connection to who we're building for, but ultimately being creative and, thinking about how to build amazing things.
Right.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree to that. I mean, sort of during the research phase, from a UX perspective, one of our key outputs is a persona or an archetype, and to sort of remove any bias or to go down a particular path for a particular individual. Possibly conflicting here with some other opinions, but we've removed gender, location, and age from all of our personas, and with that, just based on the fact that we don't want to be designing for X individual at X age at Y location. It should really be, just as it was said, we should be developing a stellar experience no matter the end market.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with both Ryan and Shira. Like it's research is just one view into it. I think there's the other part I would add is also, I think, depends on the company and the brand that you have. That can also influence them. Like with Snap, I think their brand is to be more out there, be more innovative, to try different stuff. I think that's part of their appeal. So they're going to try something different than what might be the norm, but that's also what they might be more comfortable with. So there's always going to be, I think, lots of room to do things in many different ways. As ideally, hopefully, whoever the product team is, they just make a joint decision together and take some of these other factors into account as they decide. So I don't think research is the part that will then homogenize the experience. I think hopefully we're building the right solution for whoever the customers are.
Right. Yeah. That was a really good answer. And Shira, the example you gave, like that's again like something whenever I'm trying to leverage more, even like quantitative research into my processes. Like I've heard that argument many times. Like people are like, oh no, Steve Jobs said this, or Henry Ford said about the horses. And you're right. Like you can't. That doesn't mean that you totally turn your back towards those archetypes or those data points. Yeah. So just my last question before we get into the Q&A with the audience. How do you, and especially because all three of you are, working in leadership roles, how do you enable, every person on your team, especially the product teams, to have this kind of mindset, almost having a mindset of leveraging and even like contributing towards the research processes? So even when Shira, you said like, we encourage people to go out and they talk to strangers at Starbucks, right? And that's again like something if tomorrow my manager told me to do, like I would first be like really scared. I would be like little like, oh really? Like how do I do that? So how do you guys do that? How do you motivate them and just bring that culture of thinking a lot about user research at every stage of the design process?
Great question. I think you do it in a few ways. First of all, you provide training. So whether it's lunch and learns or just little sessions on, the basics of research and how do we do research and what are the different methods. And you can do specialized sessions on, A and B testing and, how do you conduct user interviews. And the next thing is really, it's a mindset of empathy. It becomes a value to your team. Like for us, like we value empathy, and it's a seed that I plant in, from if I'm doing design onboarding for new hires, I plant that seed of how important, if you work here, empathy should be in your heart when you're building a solution. We are servants of our customers, really. And so you not only plant that seed in every single person, but you find advocates. You find people that are going to care about research as well. Especially, I have on our PM team, there's one guy named Irfan. He cares a lot about A and B testing and the quantitative, and so just helping him become a leader and leading that initiative in house. And Moya, she's another PM. She's led some of the the in-field studies, and you just kind of empower people to do that. You want to build leaders. So it's just about planting that seed and motivating people that by being more empathetic, and the more we do user research, the better products we'll build ultimately.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think going to that word empowering, I can sort of, we have a number of training things and we have a number of onboarding things for our team. But the people that have come onto our team as of late, they're going to bring a whole other set of research capabilities or research ideas. And being only a team of 7 people, we very much rely upon people coming forward with, what, why don't we do this for research, or why don't we do that for research? We did research about the questions that we were going to be asked today with the team or with our internal team earlier, and it was it's a great discussion. So yeah, just having that empowerment about saying, you've joined the team, but your opinion or your process or your methodology is just as much valued as what I could come forward with as well.
Right. That's really good.
Yeah, similarly for us as part of, to what Shira mentioned, like our part of our associate onboarding process, we introduce our personas. So first couple of days you join Walmart, we tell you all about our personas, who they are, information about them. So, and as part of our hiring process, we are looking customer-centric. We want the customer-centric mindset. We all, regardless of whether you're a merchant, whether you're a designer, a product person, engineer, we want anyone who joins the company to have that customer-centered mindset. And so it's very easy for people then to want to learn about the customer. So that's the way that, from a product design standpoint, we get engineers, we get product people involved to go out in the field with us. If somehow they can't, we want to make sure they participate and see like the highlight reel. So we try to be a little scrappy at times, but we want to make sure that everyone, especially who's designing on a product, whether it be a product person, engineer, or designer, gets to see something from the times where we've gone out and talked to our customers and gotten feedback from our customers. So there's all sorts of different ones. We have like weekly or daily emails about, opinions from Opinion Lab, where customers tell us what's good and what's not good about our site. Some are harder to read than others, but that's just ways where we try to integrate the voice of the customer just as part of our natural fabric of working here at Walmart.
Right. That's amazing.
Another thing, Preet, too, is like it doesn't have to be scary. Like we have some designers that, maybe they don't want to ask the questions. So they could be the note takers, right? Because we want to go in at least pairs. Or I've had designers that sat in on remote user testing. So they're just kind of like a fly on the wall, learning, soaking it all in without kind of being, having to ask the questions. So I think there's a lot of ways that you could incorporate people slowly. And if they're interested in it, then, you can expose them to more. But if not, user research as that T-shape is not for everyone. So
Right.
I think the empathy and caring about our users and advocating for our users is something that every product designer should, it's a skill that every product designer needs to have, but getting really deep into executing on different research methods isn't something necessarily needed.
Right. That's really well put, I would say. That's amazing. So great. Once again, thank you so much to all three of you for sharing so many learnings and insights on this topic. We have quite a few questions lined up, so let's try to. I'm sorry, we won't be able to cover. I think there are more coming in, so I think we have time for maximum. I would say 4 questions. And the toolkit one has come up, I think, 2 or 3 times, and it was part of my list of questions too. So if we could start with that. So, what are some of the tools part of your research toolkit? And we know user testing is part of all 3 of your toolkits. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can start, and from a pre-process or a beginning process perspective, anyway. I think number one being stakeholder interviews or any type of focus group sessions from a research process. If we understand. If we understand how the current stakeholders feel or how the current users feel, then we can begin to understand what the challenges are, or what the problems are, but also what the happy moments are. Something that we're also doing on a current project, and I think this was mentioned in another question, is do you find that really early user research can sometimes replace exploratory testing? Something we've done as of recent is user testing on the existing site or the existing platform before we start going down to the redesign. So understanding more from a public perspective, what do you think of the current site and what's broken, or again what's fixed? Because the product owners and the stakeholders can tell you one thing, but sometimes the public give you a little bit more of a brash answer.
That's amazing.
I'll just add on, because user testing is such an amazing resource because, as a startup, it's just hard to, recruiting and scheduling takes a long time. And so with user testing, you literally just worry about the test, and then you can get results within an hour. And then most of the work is, making sure that your test questions are great, and then making sure that you can synthesize the right insights from the tests. But that's a huge resource. And in addition to even, like you mentioned, Ryan, testing before we actually start something, like testing an existing, if there's an existing product, we'll actually go further to even test competitors or comparables, just so that we can get in the mindset of how they feel about certain things. We'll also do like a 5-second test, like they have that on user testing too, to understand their impressions. We'll also do, so for the A and B testing, we've used Optimizely. There's another tool called VWO, which is free and it's great. And that you can do multivariant testing and a number of things. So we've tested things like on our homepage, moving the categories up to see if we'll increase conversion if we just move certain sections up. So those kinds of experiments. We've done surveys, which are a great way to just gauge an understanding more on a quantitative kind of level. I mentioned field studies, so actually going out, whether it's on the street when people are lining up to an event at Much Music, in Starbucks, or going to our events, going to beer festivals, all these different places to understand our users better. And then customer feedback sessions, so beer festival event organizer came in yesterday, sitting down with them and just hearing their feedback on their experience and kind of taking that information. And lastly, stakeholder interviews specifically with our support team, which has a lot of insight and information because they deal with customers every day. And then also our sales team that also, account managers that deal with our customers every day.
Oh.
Yeah, from a toolbox perspective, from a methodology perspective, we'll basically try anything out. Like we definitely encourage our researchers to figure out what are the best methods and to try out new ones. Like I think last month for the first time we tried the whole Wizard of Oz methodology, where you basically, if you to the customer you built a system that feels realistic, but actually it's all smoke and mirrors. You have someone in the background, sending out the text messages to the customer. So we'll try anything. It's really like what are the questions or the information that the product team has, and the researcher is fully empowered to use whatever methodology to get those answers. From a tools perspective, I think for us, user testing is a big one. We have our own internal A/B testing tool, but we use other tools like UserZoom for diary studies. We started using DScout as well. So again, we empower our teams to try to figure out what's the right tool. One of the more popular tools actually that we started using is Mural, because that's for us a good sort of a tool that we use for some of the brainstorming and sort of just the affinity mapping that we do after we go through some studies as well. Right.
Yeah, I recently checked out Mural. It's certainly a quite powerful tool. Yeah, that's amazing. And there's one question I found really interesting by Vanessa. It says, like, what's the most unusual research method you've used and why?
I don't know about unusual research method, but I think similar to Shara, so I was working for a fantasy sports site, and so I had to go find my customers. It was March Madness time, which is the big college basketball tournament here in the U.S. So I went into a bar, I found my customers, and to pay them up, I bought them beer. So I did in the bar with them because that's where the users were. So I went to my users and paid them up in a way that they liked.
That's awesome. Mine it's not really related to our customers, but our user base of employees here. Since I often apply like a human-centered design approach to our culture and processes. So if there's anything in the office or anything around culture or improving our processes, I'll usually just do a Slack vote. So I use Slack a lot to gauge interest levels with our team, or, if I'm doing yesterday I was, creating a design concept and I wanted to know what would communicate it the best. And same thing, I put it out to the whole company because it's better to get, feedback from the whole company rather than just my own opinion. And that's like an extremely quick way to get feedback on something that's super small.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I don't know if it's an unusual, and I think to call her out, I think Vanessa's actually from my team, so I'll have to ask her afterwards what unusual. But actually, somebody from my team and I, we worked on a 72-inch mall kiosk. Not the same Vanessa. Now I've embarrassed myself. Awesome. And it was a gesture based device. So a user would go up and swing their hands in front of the device and try to get action or try to get the device to do something. And we spent about 4 straight days standing in front of it, watching people use it. And this was just when the Kinect came out, so people weren't quite used to the idea of waving their hands in the air. So that was it was some interesting feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. That's pretty cool.
Sorry,
Okay.
but I didn't realize.
Okay, I think we have time for last two questions, maybe. There was one question by Jem around. I think it's more around hiring. So he says, if you were to hire a UX researcher into your team today, what kind of methods or tests does the candidate is exposed to?
So I'm going to assume by tests you mean like a design sort of exercise. If that's the case, yeah, we have part of our, so we have the usual sort of one-on-ones, panel interviews, and our interview process. But yeah, for a researcher, we basically give them a problem, nothing Walmart related, but basically give them a problem and say like, okay, if you were going to design a research plan for this, what would you do? And so we give them time to sort of, to do it there on the spot. We don't expect it to be perfect, but we just, for us, the main goal of that test is to just understand their thought process. How do they approach thinking about a research problem? How do they approach creating a plan? What are the assumptions or what are the trade-offs that they make? So yeah, we do have a test within our process.
For me, if I had the luxury of hiring an in-house UX researcher, I would probably apply the same principles that I apply to anybody that we're hiring. Is this person a person that cares about their craft and really making strides in the research world, bringing a level of empathy to the company, again, being that advocate? Is this person a lifelong learner? Do they care about, like I said, improving their own craft, but sharing their knowledge with the general team? And then looking at their own reputation and track record, right? Have they done great research work? Can they prove that they've had successful outcomes with the work that they've done? And if they kind of meet all of those three, then they're probably a pretty good fit.
Right.
Yeah. The only thing I would add, I absolutely agree, is if they want to get into research and they haven't done research before, can any of their background be applied, or can any of their background sort of fit to work themselves into the research role? We're a big fan of learning in our organization and growing into specific roles. So if you can sort of come with experience in somewhere else that you can apply, then awesome. But
right.
Number one, passion. Number two, experience.
That's amazing. Cool. Awesome. So the last question before we wrap up is Zach, and he pasted it twice, so he gets to get the last part. So he's asking, do you think enveloping the task of research under design and production roles, and I think that's more specific to, I think, Shira's and Ryan's case, may compromise the ownership of that segment, of production design? So like talking about the conflicts, I think, early on, but do those conflicts also compromise the ownership of the segments when you combine research under design or even development?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Maybe Zach, can you rewrite it? Just clarify what you're trying to say, because I'm not sure if he was asking about kind of what we were talking about, if there's a bias, if it's just design and production doing the user research versus including development.
Oh, I think it's potentially if there's a developer doing it or a designer doing it, not an independent person.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. Honestly, for me, it's important that people feel like they're growing. And that means, like, to be a great designer, you don't just have to learn about design. Like, I encourage people to go and learn more about development, learn more about what your fellow product managers are doing. And so I'm happy for people to take some time out of what they're doing in production to better themselves, because that means they're going to be happier, because that means they're challenged and they're growing. And, if they want to fully become a UX researcher or fully be a product manager, I'd be happy to assist in that transition. So why the other two have user research separately? That's because we're still a small organization. So, before we had product teams, we had one developer working on, he was the sole product team, right? And now we're just at a point where we can scale and we can start building a user research practice and having more people take part in those user research activities. But I think the bigger our organization gets, of course, we want to have UX research, as a kind of deep expertise eventually.
Awesome. Brian and Nick, anything to add on that?
Yeah, no. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
Oh, okay. So just to clarify, actually, we encourage our associates to grow their skills in any way, shape, or form. So I think our model is actually closer to Chiara's, where, yes, someone might be deep in, say, interaction design, but if they want to learn user research, yes, by all means. If they want to do interaction, visual, content, and user research, that's fine as well. Like we want to enable them to grow in whatever way, shape, or form they want. So, but to your point, is there going to be a bias if someone is the designer and the researcher? Potentially. And so that's where, as they're learning sort of, either if they're a designer starting to learn the research skills, part of the mentorship that we provide is to help them try to separate those two different roles, or we try to at least have them, as they start to learn about research, to try to separate it and maybe do be the researcher on this particular project, but be a designer. But we try not to necessarily have one person do all of it on a particular project.
Right. Cool. Awesome. So we're right on time. Thank you so much once again, Shira, Nick, and Brian for sharing all the learnings, experiences, and also going through these long list of questions that we received. For everyone else, so we have on the Slack group, Shira and Nick are already there. I think Brian is joining in soon. So I will try and post some of the questions in the user research channel, and I'm sure there are also others that can contribute to the same discussion. So make sure let's keep the conversations going on the Slack group. Again, a big shout out and thank you to NomNom for helping us with the webinars and the events. And their discount code of 20%, which is data-driven UX. Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. And see you guys on Slack.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Nick,
Thanks,
I can't hear
Steve.
the thing you're saying.
Oh, bye.
Nothing.
Oh, Rita's done. Okay, bye, guys. Thank you. It was awesome chatting with you.